Be careful. Pretty soon, this will be the no longer home service hustle.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Home Service Hustle. I am your coach, Jonathan Bannister, and today's episode we have Landon Brewer, Senior Vice President of Geottl Airconditioner. This guy brings 20 plus years of knowledge to the industry from a background in finance, really came to the industry by accident. He's going to tell his story. We're going to talk about KPIs. We're going to talk about the levers you should be pulling to have a successful home service business. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about conspiracy theories. For those things you don't want to miss, but you're going to have to take a step inside. So let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Home Service Hustle. I'm your host, Jonathan Bannister, and today we have a special guest, Landon Brewer. Landon, thank you for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So listen, I know you've got 20 plus years in this industry and you've done a lot of things. So let's just kind of maybe start at the beginning. And how did you get into this space?
Completely by accident. I don't have a mechanical background at all. I don't have a trades background at all. I was a financial analyst working in the Midwest, and I'm absolutely so not mechanically inclined that one of my partners, Ken, would always make fun of me. We'd go to meetings. He'd be like, "Hey, it's a little warm in here. You see that device over there on the wall? If you press that button down, it can make it cooler in here." But no, I was a financial analyst many moons ago, and I answered an ad in the newspaper. That's when you used to find jobs in the newspaper. And for a confidential interview, it was the guys that took Service Experts public, and the team there kind of laid out the vision of how they go to market. They build the best practices organization, and from then a training organization, a buying group, etc. And then they made some franchise offerings available with the objective to kind of roll up, consolidate, and either go public or sell. And I thought the idea was brilliant, so jumped in on the ground floor of that, kind of became the finance guru, eventually kind of took over the half of the business that focused on independent contractors, the non-franchise contractors, and got to know thousands of HVAC, plumbing, electrical, roofing guys throughout North America. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever done, helping those guys build their businesses, kind of compete in their own markets, and just watching their success and what it did for their families and their employees. It was pretty awesome. So I kind of fell in love with it. Didn't intend to stay with it. Didn't really intend to be in the trades. I thought you had to be a tradesperson. And from there, I joined with a couple of those guys, and over time bought some businesses, sold some businesses. Eventually moved out to the West Coast to work for ARS Rescue Rooter. They'd sold some businesses too, and took over kind of the West Coast operations there. So that brought me out here, and that's when I really dove into the nitty gritty day to day of building, some locations from scratch, scaling other businesses, got into big box, all elements of the business, and I fell in love with it even more, and just kind of continued to do that on the buying and selling path, and just kind of kept in contact with all of my friends from the industry throughout the years, part of all the best practices groups, and then kind of formulated kind of an online little best practices organization, just to at first just to kind of like stay on the cutting edge, talk to some of these guys that I've known for years, like what's the innovation, what's the best practice now, what's the modern day stuff, and grew that, and have a kind of a big platform now, but it was never really the intent other than just to like perfect the business and how we look at the business. So yeah, that's kind of the long story of how I got into the space.
So coming out of University of Missouri, like you had no intention of going and being the HVAC guy, right?
Not at all.
I mean, I think those stories they're the most interesting, when it's not your typical my dad did it and then I started doing it and just kind of worked my way through it. And though those stories are great, I like hearing the ones that it was just, I answered an ad in a paper and then the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah, I was, kind of come from like a family of entrepreneurs and did some other businesses as well. Uh, but, obviously liked this one the best and had the most success in this one. But I thought, the path for me was, I went out, got a master's degree, was going down the path of accounting and finance and just wanted to, master that element of it to, be the next creator of Google or whatever. And just stuck here and it's been just an awesome ride.
So let's unpack a little bit of that. So obviously the platform you're talking about is your service Einstein's. How did that get started? I know you said, just kind of a place to keep up with everyone, and then kind of what does it evolve to? And let's talk about what it looks like today.
Yeah. So let's see, it's about 5 years old now. I kind of just had this vision and my partner and I were talking. I'm like, well, there's definitely not been a lot of modern adaptations of best practices. The groups I love. Been a member of Service Nation Alliance, Service Roundtable, SGI. That's the organization I started with. The Next Stars of the World, just awesome groups of fantastic people. But I saw what I thought really was missing is a lot of that's kind of a smorgasbord approach of here's a whole bunch of systems that you can have access to and come to some meetings and chat with some people. And really what I always got the most of and what I would tell people, hey, I'm thinking about joining this, thinking about doing that. I'm like, well, the best part of it is the networking with the people, right? So going to dinner, having drinks afterwards, talking in intermissions with the people who are actually in the trenches day to day doing this. And what they're running into, what they're doing that's kind of unique, innovative. And I always got the most ideas out of that. And that's what everybody's feedback was always. And I said, well, hell, I mean, we got social media. Like sometimes contractors are slow to adapt to stuff, but it didn't seem like there was a big play on social media that was focused. There were certain groups focused on the trades themselves, like, the HVAC technicians groups, et cetera. But none were really focused on owners, managers, and people looking like evolve in the space, staying on the cutting edge. And I thought, well, just kind of a natural opportunity. Like, let's see if I can reconnect with all these people and just keep ongoing dialogue. And so really at the time, it was just, hey, how do we make sure that we're staying on the cutting edge? How do we make sure that we're comparing ourselves to other, key industry leaders, et cetera? And so it's just a group of people that I knew that we all kind of got together and built this cool community and a lot of activity and a lot of like innovative ideas coming out of a lot of sharing, which is the friggin' best part about this industry, man. Everybody, it used to be a little bit different. It used to be like, people viewed their competition. They didn't want to share ideas, have access. It's just not that way today. And I don't know if it's because of the rise of the internet, social media, or what, but everybody is just so willing to share their best practice, willing to share their ideas, open their businesses up to everybody else. And so I just thought, yeah, social media is a perfect platform for it. And so we did that, and then we kind of evolved it from that to think, now that we've got this massive platform of thousands and thousands of contracting business owners, like, what if we could like be the intermediary for, where you're at today as your independent small business, and then, eventual maximizing, monetization efforts either through, some PE roll up, selling your business or what have you, right? What is the key part? And my experience at, these other organizations, ARS, Geottl, et cetera, as we're, consolidating, growing businesses, one of the most difficult parts is integrating all the businesses, right? It's not hard to find good businesses with good people. It's hard to integrate them and make sure you don't, misstep in that process. And then what exactly do you integrate and how is it working? So, I thought, we've got this platform. Let's make, kind of an offshoot platform that's focused on that, the integration piece of what's necessary to maximize the value of your business. So that's where it's at today.
So talk a little bit more about the struggle there. So you said it's not hard to find the good people and the good, a good business, or maybe one that just is even being ran well, and somebody's just looking to maybe sell it because they don't have someone to pass it down to. So what makes it so difficult to integrate? What are some of those big issues that y'all commonly see with the integration and when y'all are merging these and consolidating these businesses?
Man, it's been an interesting evolution over time. Going back all the way to the consolidation phase that you saw in the '90s, where they just kind of seemingly just put all these disparate businesses together, and they kind of just focused on a trade, and they thought, well, we've got this residential business, and we'll merge with a commercial business, do a little industrial in there, and it's HVAC, it's all the same, right? And we're just gonna bolt on some revenue. Well, clearly that didn't work, and a lot of those failed. And then, you had the ARSs and some of these other consolidators over time kind of break apart and then do a regional play. But even those organizations they weren't very integrated. They're very decentralized, and they did the right thing by focusing on finding good operators. But then when the operators eventually go, and they have, unless they've really developed some bench strength, they don't really have anybody at kind of a corporate level that can operate those businesses or help. If something starts to fail, they got to go out and buy something else or find somebody else to run it, right? So there wasn't a lot of integration, and like we didn't even have at ARS, we didn't have a integrated CRM. I think they were trying to build their own CRM. They never really got traction with it. So when we went in there, we put everybody on the same CRM in that region, and then we built initially like a spreadsheet. So we could just speak the same language, and it was like manual entry of every call that you run, what was the outcome? And then we would go into the spreadsheet, it would tabulate it, and then we could talk to each other on these GM conference calls and report our metrics and report our numbers and how we're growing our business. And that eventually evolved in like an access database, and now it's a little bit more sophisticated. But back in the day, I mean, that was about as advanced as it was when you're integrating these businesses. Just spreadsheets, and you had to send your spreadsheet in, and then we would review it on a conference call, and you better know your numbers, and that's kind of how we elevated collectively as one unit. Today you have way more robust CRMs. You got the ability virtually to look into any of the branch locations, etc. But still, you have a little bit of everybody uses it a different way. Everybody has a slightly different approach to sales or marketing. Everybody's got a different approach to pricing, etc. And so, you really have to, we still had to have our separate kind of KPI tracking and monitoring system just to make sure that, because one business was operating one way, another business had a slightly different way of doing it. We wanted to be able to compare business to business from a metric standpoint. So we saw if somebody in, Alabama was just knocking it out of the park on maintenance calls, and they figured out a way to just sell a ton of IAQ, or they were converting some of their HVAC calls to plumbing. Like, one, we had to quantify it. What were they doing specifically, and then how are they doing it, and then could we repeat that in the other businesses? And so that gave all the other businesses a big competitive advantage as well. And so that's kind of the evolution of what I've done with the group, is like, how do we take all these different disparate businesses that are all operating the same industry, kind of speak the same language, generally wanting to do the same things, but how do we make sure that we have a group of people that have a mastery of their KPIs, that understand the metrics and the levers of their business that drive the business? And then there's some, level of accountability and consistency. And that just takes place through having, an online platform where we can see KPIs and we can have these conversations and then act as like we're one cohesive unit. And I think that's really been the missing piece to a lot of this consolidation.
So Service Einstein, it is like a group where it's individual business owners, but they're just kind of working and growing together and being able to share data, maybe even have like friendly competitions between numbers and all trying to get better and achieve but understanding, like you said, the levers of their business is actually going to show them what real growth is. Because I think, and I think you would probably agree that is some misconceptions that I see a lot would be they think they know their numbers, but really they're looking at the numbers that someone taught them or what they're able to pull out of their CRM system. But at the end of the day, like, they're not really looking at efficiency rates and things like that. And they're only looking at total revenue, and they're not looking at, they're running their business still from their bank account and their checkbook. And no one's really showed them the true KPIs that they ought to be looking at. So maybe just talk about that a little bit. Like, what are some of the key metrics that you feel a business owner, big or small, that is crucial to their business that they should be paying attention to on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that. So that was the other kind of missing link. This is like, all of these groups and organizations are great. All the trainers are great. Like, they're all great, but they all offer something slightly different, right? There's some different components to it. And most of them don't say, you know what, you're doing this wrong. You have to do it this way. This is how, this is step one. This is how your organizational chart needs to look. This is how you have to formulate your pricing. This is how you have to manage your margins. These are the KPIs you need to look at. Nobody tells you that.
Right.
I think some of them might be afraid, or a lot of them just don't know, right? A lot of them haven't operated a business in the last, several years, right? So, we joined some of these organizations. We noticed that, like, man, the KPIs that they're recommending in some of the models, the same stuff like I wrote 15, 20 years ago. And that's evolved drastically, and even more so rapidly in the last couple of years, all these price increases and the changes in the industry. So, that was kind of the other missing component. And the other kind of passion that I have is, that there's a lot of gurus out there in the space. It seems like there's more gurus than operators sometimes, especially when you are on social media, like as much as I am. It seems like they're just all over the place, and some of them have the same, been teaching the same sales practices for the last 20 years, which many of which are kind of outdated, and the ideologies are gone. They're kind of indirect, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so the real reason that I wanted to keep, build that group was like, let's have it as a repository of information that, if somebody's out there providing misinformation, bad information, information that's potentially harmful to these businesses, and they may not be doing it on purpose, they're doing it because that's what they know. It can really hurt these businesses. And my passion has always been like growing the industry, growing the business, like, sharing with everybody what's worked for me and our businesses. So that's kind of the deal. But I guess your specific question was, what KPIs are the crucial ones, right?
Yeah, I mean, what are some things that you feel are most common that you typically see some of the contractors not paying attention to, but really are some of the more important levers that they ought to be paying attention to instead of just flat revenue?
Yeah. So, a lot of people focus on, they understand that you need to focus on a margin, right? We need to achieve a certain gross margin target of X%. Realistically, it's kind of flawed logic. That's one kind of metric that you should look at and make sure that's in line with what you're budgeted for. But, gross margin contribution for everything you do is important. So the gross margin dollar contribution. So if you have a business that works off of crew days for plumbing, air conditioning, electric, whatever, that you've got a limited capacity of manpower, and
right.
Every day, in order to maximize your results, to achieve your budgeted goals, etc., you have to make sure that those people, that those team members or those crews are delivering you a minimum required gross margin contribution. So if you go out and you sell $10,000 job, and you bought the equipment, and it cost you, 40% of that, and you're not paying properly, they take too long in the job, or it carries over in another day, you might have spent now 2 days worth of that manpower and only generated, $2,000 of gross margin contribution, which isn't going to get you very far, right? Unless you just have unlimited resources of labor, which nobody does,
Right.
you need to make sure that you dial that back in. And I like to say, it should be at least $5,000 per crew day, regardless of what you do, gross margin contribution, because again, you have limited resources there. And that's where you make the most of the gross margin dollars. So I'd say that's probably the key. And then, the first thing that you got to do is make sure that you're priced right. And people just, seem to get that wrong. They focus on, there's all kinds of formulas out there. They focus on, uh, you know, whatever formula they've been given, and they say, I have to have, this is my hourly rate. So I've got to be now at $200 an hour or $300 an hour, whatever that is, to achieve my goal. But it's so flawed because they always underestimate, what the actual efficiency of that labor is. And so, I've never seen, I think somebody told me at one point that they saw a report about the average efficiency of a technician in our space is like in the high 30s for high performing companies. It may get up in the 40%. It means your billable efficiency, the amount of time you're billing per hour that you're paying for those people to work, right? And so there's a big efficiency gap, which is why our prices have to be what they are, because until we get to a point where somebody creates a model that we can be 100% efficient with our labor, the customer has to pay for that. So that's a big error that I see a lot of people do. They come up with this thing. It's like, okay, I need to be $300 an hour, or I looked at what everybody else in my area is doing, or what other friends of mine are doing, and they're at 200, 250. I need to be, right in the middle of that. And they kind of just choose this arbitrary number, and then they don't account for the efficiency, and they don't account for even how long the average task time is. They have that miscalculated. So you need to make sure that every time you send somebody out, you know exactly what their contribution is going to be in order for you to really maximize that business. And most companies don't really have that figured out.
What do you feel that number is, Landon? What is, is there an hourly rate average they should be looking at? Or more importantly, what is that efficiency number that you like to see in businesses that you're running?
There's some interesting new through the CRMs and stuff that we've seen that kind of can track that billable hourly efficiency. I know that I think you had Billy on your show, and that's one of the key things that's kind of he's driving his software around. And just looking at some of that data, and I've seen that he's, by tracking it closely, he can get it to 50 to 60% efficiency. And if you can do that, then it's just a reflection of what your other cost bases are. So what's your overhead based on what service you're providing? Because overhead for a $50 million business in Las Vegas is going to be different than one that's a $3 million business in Idaho. But you got the overhead factors in there, and then you've got you've got to account for your purchasing and et cetera, your costing there. But then the most important part of that is what and how you're paying the labor.
Okay.
Right. So your team members. And my philosophy has always been, and what I've seen is, nobody's really figured out, a couple of them have scaled a little bit through a seemingly kind of volume play, but nobody's really figured out how to be the Walmart of heating and air effectively. Right. Nobody's really figured out, man, I just have marketed myself so that the public knows that if you go with me, you're going to get the best price, and I have unlimited resources. It's just not, no one's scaled it to that point. So the only ones that I see like driving Uber premium value for their businesses and maximizing profitability are the premium service providers. In order to get that, you have to have the best labor and the best team, and you got to pay for that. So, if the going rate in your market is $25 an hour, and you aren't planning to pay somebody $45, $50 an hour and building a plan to get those people to that level, or whatever that a dollar amount may be, and your pricing doesn't reflect that, you're never going to get there. So I think that's the key consideration. It's, I think you can get to a 50% productivity if you're really, really, keen on watching that and managing that. But management is the key part of that. Right. And then, you have to have people that are driven, want to make money, good people, and really got to genuinely want to take care of them. And so, and make opportunities available that are only available in your company, right? So as we scaled these other businesses, we've scaled them regionally, and we have opportunities now for technicians to advance to kind of, service line manager level opportunities, mid-level management, general manager, executive level management, all the way, across the spectrum that are not available to most people in the trades, because, your average company might be a $3 million company that, the boss is the owner, right? So if you want to build a company that's got opportunities like that for people, or like that to transfer from, Texas to Arizona or wherever, you got to start with that in mind, right? You can't start with a limited mindset.
So let's talk about company culture. I mean, where do you see, obviously there's been a big shift, let's say in the last 20 years, but I still feel like things are constantly changing. And I think it's getting harder and harder to create that culture that is always attracting. I think a lot of it has to do with technology and innovation. Like, just things are rapidly changing so quickly. You look at Walmart 20 plus years ago. I mean, it was a company where it was being dropped in certain communities and backyards, and everybody wanted to flock and go work at Walmart because they knew to take care of their people, and they had good benefits and so forth and so on. And, like, you don't have that now. Like, no one's flocking to Walmart to go get jobs necessarily. So how is a company going to be able to scale it, to a Walmart level in the home service industry? Or is it even possible to get there? And then from the purchasing power and so forth and so on, like you're saying, like, is it even doable? Can you get the staff, and can you create a culture on that vast of a level that people are always wanting to come put an application in to come work for you?
Yeah, it's since I've been in the industry, this is the number one complaint that you hear. I can't find good people. I got people retiring, and I can't replace them. It's I've heard that, and in that time, I've greenfielded companies from scratch to large levels. We've taken smaller businesses, significantly elevated them. Built hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. And added hundreds and hundreds of employees. And so I think if you ascribe to that mindset, that's going to be your problem. If you say, I live a life of abundance in all areas of business, including the people I attract, you're not going to have that issue. But it does take, that's the focus of all these businesses. You got to have all the right systems in place, right? And accountability measures, and you have to have the setup correct, right? But then it's the people that drive the business. And you have to constantly be on the lookout for the best and brightest of people from all over the place, anybody that you run into, right? Recruiting has been one of my primary efforts for the last 20 years. Every time I see somebody that I meet that might fit a good role, regardless of what their current capacity is, I want to work with you. Like, I know that you have talent in certain areas, and I would love to see you, harness that talent, and let's see what we can do with it. I'm known to stop people at gas stations that are driving service trucks, talk to them. How's your opportunity? How do you like the field? Do they communicate well? If I get a good feeling, hey man, you ever want another opportunity? Come over here. At Jiffy Lube, you find those people like anywhere you're at.
Yeah.
Part of being on these social media networks, targeting them. There's a million ways to find people, but one of the key ways, I think, is that, as you're scaling and wanting to build, time to start budgeting now for kind of your own personal university or academy, right? So if you can find a way to take people that are just have the right attitude and aptitude, and help train them, mold them, and invest in the resources, and get a structure put in place. You could take people out of high school. You could take people out of any other occupation, which was huge during COVID, by the way. A lot of restaurant personnel, et cetera. And then you can plug them into an existing system, like a university structure that you can create with the right people. graduated hundreds of people into those roles. And I think that's going to be something big into the future because, like I said, I didn't come into this industry on purpose. It was by accident I discovered it. I just had never thought like, hey, this is maybe the right career path for me, and just never, it wasn't even an idea in my head because nobody ever talked to me about it, right? So I'm not anti-education, but I'm getting more and more there by the day based on the cost of college and graduate school education and the amount of debt that it's burdening people with, when I know very well that I've got people that have no educational background whatsoever. They're just solid people, good communicators with the right attitude and aptitude, and they can come in with no college debt and very limited training and make six-figure income right away. And talk about building a great culture. Get a couple of those people on your team being cheerleaders, and it starts.
Yep. I'm also scared that the price of school is increasing, but also the amount of just like garbage that's coming out of some of these universities. I don't know if you're a real political person, but
No.
I'm trying to build something for my kids, and it's like my wife's like, y'all are all going to school before you're going to mess with dad's companies, and it's like I'm to the point where like I don't even know if I want them to go to college. I'd rather them get a degree on YouTube and Google at this point, like to come out and learning and being just poisoned by some of the garbage that's coming out of universities these days. And it's sickening to know how expensive school has gotten, and especially with some of these professors are making $500,000, $750,000, and they can sit there and do and say some of the shit that they are. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, it's rough, and I'm not shy politically. I'm probably to the chagrin of some of the owners of PE guys that I've worked with in the past, would like me to calm it down a little bit. But I'm like, you got a platform, you're supposed to speak your mind, right? And so yeah, I'm with you there. I think if you've got a specific direction that you want to take in life, you're like, I'm bound to determine. I want to follow this. I love this area of law, or
right.
I want to be a teacher. Or I want a specific engineering, doctoral, whatever path. That's great. You got to know that going in, though. Otherwise, it's a 90% chance of a big ass waste of time. And so, I'm right with you 100% on that. And you're talking to somebody that's got a lot of education.
All right, so let's take a pause. Let's do a little random question here. So maybe we'll tie this into, maybe it could be something political. Maybe it's something in the home service space. Who knows? But what's the biggest lie that you once believed was true?
Ooh, the biggest lie that I once believed was true. Man, this is probably going to take me down a conspiracy theory path. But
I love those.
I was fascinated, as a finance accounting guy. I was fascinated with economics, and was going to school, taking a lot of these econ classes, and it just fascinated me by the way that you were taught how things work, right? And how supply and demand controls everything, and how inflation's caused all this stuff, right? And then you start your independent research, and things don't make sense. You start going down the path of, back in 1913, we didn't have any taxes, Federal Reserve. Like, how did people survive, and why was the economy working different then? And then you get in, you discover that the Federal Reserve is really not a federal institution. It's that the fact that we're printing money endlessly is what causes inflation, and the fact that we're printing money endlessly and giving it to people that are not United States citizens, who were taxing at effective 60 to 70% rates. It's not really how they didn't teach you that.
Right.
So I'd say that's the biggest kind of lie, is just how the entire economy and monetary system works. It was probably that from a conspiracy theory standpoint.
You ever read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
No, I've not. I've heard of it though.
Yeah, you ought to check it out. It's pretty mind blowing. And the guy waited to write the book until his daughter graduated college, I believe, and kind of opens up the book by saying, I've been wanting to write this for a long time. My daughter, I knew that I was going to wait till she at least graduated, and if obviously something happens to me, we'll figure that out. At that point, but I at least wanted to see her be able to graduate. But to hear some of the stories that this guy was to purposely go in from a strategic angle of selling these infrastructures to other countries, basically, that could not afford it, that it was 100% going to cripple their economy and put them in debt. And then now all of a sudden we've got military bases all over these places where they could not afford the power plant or this new nuclear site that we sold them and put them on, and all being financed through the World Bank. And it's pretty interesting to see how things really work compared to what, like you're saying, what we're taught and what we're educated on through an economics class in college. And it's like, well, then you start thinking like, who wrote this book and who are they? And then you see the independent studies and research, and it's completely opposite. But that stuff, now and today of the internet, even though the World Wide Web, there's just so much more that's supposedly at our fingertips. It's also so much, it seems like it's a lot easier to make information just kind of disappear, or just stack whatever they want us to believe and see just on top of it. So it's
be careful. Pretty soon, this will be the no longer home service hustle.
All right, so let's talk about Geottl. Like, when did you go to Geottl? How did that come to be? What's the future there? What does that look like?
Yeah. So Geottl, legacy business, been around for 80 plus years. I stopped counting at 80, but it's over 80 now. And used to manufacture equipment many moons ago. There's actually it's just rich with history. The brothers have more patents, mostly related to the air conditioning, etc., than the Wright brothers had. So just a massive history. There's actually a History Channel did a special on Geottl, I think like 12, 15 years ago. And so while I was at ARS, ARS acquired Geottl. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but probably in the late 2000s. And so ARS had owned them, and then we were in the midst of our 3-year earn-out, where we were kind of given all these broken business to fix and then build, and we successfully executed that. And after that, we kind of all the management team just kind of like went their own separate ways and did stuff. And I called my partner Ken, and I'm like, hey, I'm now sitting here as kind of a regional manager, air conditioning business, don't have any stake in it all anymore, and want to do something again. I'm going to kind of travel around and figure out where I want to be, and let's get together and do it again. And he called me. He's like, hey, I got an opportunity to acquire Geottl. Geottl had been hit by some attorney general issues for some sales and marketing practices. And because it was owned by that national consolidator, they wanted to silo that business. And it just started to bleed, losing money, losing employees left and right. And so Ken was able to, get in there and get it kind of on a fire sale, and then start building a team up. And so I was, there early on, working with him to do that, start building the team and looking at, what are we going to do with it from an opportunity standpoint. And then eventually I said, I'm just going to move back out to the West Coast, and let's buy some business in California. Bought a business in Vegas. We were allowed to get back into Vegas. And then we just kind of started growing it and building it from there. And so I've been kind of around ever since the kind of change of ownership. And I think 4 years ago, we sold it majority stake to a private equity firm, and then just did a recapitalization to a new private equity firm in December.
That's awesome. I know, I talk to Ken as often as I can. He was giving me some fatherly mentor advice over the weekend. He likes to drop his little smart ass messages and try to poke the bear at me. And but he gave me some good tips this weekend. But I know the model, that you guys are trying to do, and I love even like maybe the scale back and kind of having the smaller, much more dialed in operations in every city around you, instead of trying to have those $40 and $50 million beasts, in different sectors of the country. Like, do you feel that like that is the future and possibly the way to scale it, to even get closer to that Walmart model, is to have the smaller operations that are more, more controllable as far as running the business goes?
Well, I think it's dependent on a couple of things, because I've seen it operated at both levels of larger, centralized, big behemoth models, and then smaller, still centralized, just kind of focused geographic models. And I think what depends, depends on where you're at in the country, right? So,
Right.
Population density, traffic patterns, and your go-to-market strategy. So, California, for example, right? If we're using a mass media approach in California and we're broadcasting all over Southern California, well, there's no central hub in Southern California where you can get to, Ventura County, LA County, Orange County, Inland Empire, down to, San Diego County within a reasonable amount of time. I've tried to do that. When we were ARS, we had, Home Depot stores that were just like I think the radius was like a 350-mile radius. And so we would just kind of have to, okay, on Tuesdays, we're going that way. And Wednesdays, we're going this way. And it wasn't a real sustainable model. So I think the best model for a market like Southern California, where it's heavy traffic, huge population density, is you can market the broad spectrum, but then you have to have strategic locations that will enable you to, minimize windshield time, serve more customers. Vegas, for example, it's kind of a central location where you can get from one end of Vegas to the next in like maybe with some traffic, 45 minutes to cover the entire metroplex, right? So you can have one central hub that's 50, 60, whatever million, big mega company there, because it makes sense that you don't have to have far-reaching locations, because it's not like you have people driving an hour and a half to get to work. So I think it just depends on kind of those factors.
Do you think in the future, do you see the possibility maybe changing, like when we start talking about like, human occupied drones or something like that, where you can get to those places much quicker? Do you see the future changing with AI or anything that you really think is going to make this huge impact in the next few years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things it's a really exciting time right now in the industry. It's like like a renaissance. I keep saying in our space right now. One, you have the backing is private equity, which I think has got tons of runway. It's still got some runway, but it's done better because it's specifically focused on the home services segment, right? It's a niche business. They've done their homework. They've capitalized it well. They're finding legacy operators. They're not trying to significantly change those operations. So I think that's a positive. And the more interest and focus that comes into the space, the more recession-proof we are, the more COVID-proof we are. It just gets it more exciting and attractive. So I think that's a cool element. And some of those guys, some of them are going to be more successful than others, and some of them are going to come up with some innovative practices of doing business. But I think there's also other models that you're going to see that technology is enabling. So I don't know why, for example, that we haven't entered a SaaS play yet. So nobody's really scaled a SaaS version of this business yet. Leasing, is kind of somewhat similar, but there's technology available today where you got devices that you can monitor somebody's equipment, that performs their equipment, and you'll know that the probability of it breaking down, when it's going to break down, whether it needs maintenance, whether you need to change the filter. Like there's devices where you can monitor for a relatively small investment that equipment and make every single one of your truck rolls productive, right? So today we've got these maintenance plans where we're going out and just randomly, maybe not randomly, it's a little more strategic than that, but effectively randomly going out and servicing all these people a couple of times a year. And, we don't know, have they been taking care of that unit? Has it been a dust storm? Is that unit operating efficiently? We don't know any information about that unit when we go out. If we can know that, we can make the efficiency of this business so much more. It's just so much more incredible.
Yeah.
So there's that piece. And then I think the SaaS piece might be, I pay for everything now. I used to not be this way, but now I just migrated the same way the rest of the world is. I pay for my Netflix, my gym membership, I get my haircut. Like everything is a monthly recurring charge. And I don't know why we haven't moved to that model where we've got the technology that we can monitor the systems. We've got things like warranties. We've got, available capital. Like there's no reason why a customer couldn't pay, $99, $129, depending on what they want, and have endless comfort. Whenever the equipment tells us it needs to be tuned up, maintained, we go out there and do that. Whenever it tells us we need to replace the filter, we go out and do that. Whenever it tells us it's beyond its capacity, it's inefficient, needs outdated, needs to be replaced, we can go out and do that. And you just pay to be part of the club, and we're not going to burden you with anything other than what the tech tells us to do.
Yeah, I think we're not far away from it. I know someone who's building an ecosystem like that right now that it may completely flip this industry upside down on the way of business was done. And we'll see, right? I love those BHAG dreams that people have, and I definitely want to make sure I get to be a part of it instead of from the outside looking in. But I think we're going to see, for people who don't know, there's super apps, and those super apps over in Asian countries right now are making up 3 to 5, 15% of the entire gross revenue of that country right now. And these super apps are nothing more like, the closest thing that we have to a super app is Uber. Uber One is trying to be a super app where you'll be able to get your food, get your car, get a lot of different things in this one ecosystem. And I think we're going to see that in the near future, where we're going to see different AI devices that are going to be hooked up to these super apps, and you're going to be able to say, all right, well, my filter needs to be changed because it tells me, and it's going to go ahead and find the company close to you that has that filter, and they're just going to bring it here and drop it off for you. Be the same thing if you need your oil changed, or your your dog needs to get a bath or groomed or something. You're just going to be able to go into the super app, find somebody within that ecosystem, the closest one to you that has the best reviews, that can get there in an hour and over and done with it. So I think we're not far from it, and people want convenience. I know I do. Loyalty, in my opinion, is just kind of gone. Like, there's a lot of people these days that are learning how to give that high quality 5-star service. It ought to be a model of every business in the world should be focused on customer service. And the ones that aren't, I think, will be left behind eventually, because convenience and taking care of the right way is really what people want. And if you can keep delivering that consistently, and you're inside that ecosystem that people want to be in, I think you're going to have a business that does well.
I agree. And when you were asking earlier about what's the biggest lie, instead of going down that, I was like, okay, how does it apply to home services? I was going to say something very similar to that. Like we've been taught that this customer loyalty thing, that customers, it's the old school, like, let's get them on this membership agreement. And once you sell every customer that gets to do this, just give them a membership free. We want to get out there a couple times a year, and then we want to lock those customers in for the next time they want to replace. And I just think that the internet, the availability of research, the shopping patterns from consumers, they've changed so drastically that's kind of antiquated, right? And especially some of those, like, young maintenance call, unless you have other ancillary business you're going to sell them, it's kind of like a loss. that you unnecessarily incurring, right? So I think that, kind of that old school mentality of like, let's just get as many people on these old school basic memberships as possible to grow the business, and there's value there. I think that's kind of uh, a lie at this point.
I don't disagree with you there. I think instead of focusing on the value of your memberships and your maintenance club members and however you want to look at it, like focus on reinvest all of that thought and time and resources into customer service. Build, make an impact and that can tell a story that people can resonate with, and make it about convenience. Because that's what you ought to be selling: convenience. Comfort and convenience is really what you should be selling at this point. And I just think there's going to come a time where thermostats and your cameras and everything are all going to be tied into one of these super apps or something. And it's going to be smarter than us. And that's good, because I'm like you. I'm the least technical mofo that's out there. I'm very technical with computer savvy stuff, but I don't want to get my hands dirty, and I don't want to go mess with air conditioning equipment. And I want to keep small businesses around. At least that's what I tell my wife. That's why I won't go fix shit or do anything. I'm just going to hire them. I need to help them with their business. But I just think that there's going to be stuff that's going to tell us. It's going to be tied into whatever system you operate off of, whether it's Amazon or Google or whatever. And it's going to tell us when something's wrong, and it's going to schedule it and fix it and get the right people in there. And that's convenient. So we can do more time spending with our family or whatever it is we want to go do. So I think people should focus on customer service, creating an experience, and convenience, and stop worrying about thinking that your 5,000 or 10,000 club members are going to be there in 5 years, because I don't think they're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. And, I would some people, it almost sounds like you can take it like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. So, I've heard that, the big box will come in and disrupt all these businesses, right? Utility companies are going to come in and take all of our customers. And to some degree, they've done some of that. But, all the businesses I've been affiliated with have thrived in the midst of that and grown, at record pace. So I wouldn't be concerned about the changes. I like to stay on the forefront of them, to know how I can participate in that, right?
100%. So I'll drop something to you and kind of tell you that some of the people that are, kind of on the front and center of some of this that's taking place, they're talking about there's going to be huge opportunities to be able to let these contractors be able to make a ton of extra money that'll be straight to their bottom line. Because if they open up their customer database that they're already having inside of their ecosystem, they'll be able to have a rev share off of everything else that these people are ordering or buying or subscribing to. And it's why not be a part of it? Because I would tell you right now that, some of the biggest dispatch software companies out there that have hundreds of thousands of customers, if we don't think that data is not being, given out to companies, corporations, whatever, that's not, data is being sold left and right by every big major company that's collecting it. So it's I would at least want to know that my data that's maybe being used without me knowing, that it's at least going to something I can collect and make money off of. That's just kind of the way I feel.
Yeah, everybody should view their business as a data-driven business, and they should be monetizing the data within their own business. That's ultimately the direction that we've gone.
Yep, and you could do it on a scale now if you wanted to, because you could take your database and you could go to one of your local businesses that you have nothing to do with, like a florist or oil change and shop, and say, hey, look, I've got this database, you got this database. Why don't we just do some cross promotion marketing from an email or text message database that we're connected, we're in the same community, and you could do something like that. But it's going to go digital here before long, and it's there's going to be people that are going to say, no, I'm not going to be a part of that. And you're talking about probably millions of dollars of revenue that they could be putting into their bottom line, instead of just feeling that you still have this very protected, sacred customer membership list. And it's man, when those people start dying off here soon, the ones that have been raised in the Facebook, Instagram, like grew up and that's all they know. Like there is no loyalty to these people at all whatsoever. Like the membership, they're like, well, no, like you were saying, like if you can let me pay one monthly fee and you'll come take care of all my shit and maybe, right? But like they want convenience. Like you're not going to get loyalty out of these people.
No. I mean, you got to embrace change, whether you're a technician, and that's, part of the integration to, a new environment. You have to embrace change, right? But it's the same thing for most of the owners and managers in the space. A lot of them get locked into this. I've been doing this way for so long. This is how we do things, blah, blah, blah. They, like the ones that are successful, really just say there's change afoot. I want to stay in the leading edge of it. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to adopt it. I'm going to invest a little bit in it, and I'm going to figure it out. And when you figure it out, you can monetize it. And
that was some of the, completely different conversation and kind of what's being talked about. But, kind of what Ken dropped to me this weekend, and I'm struggling with some family issues and, having to make some tough decisions in my business and stuff. And I was kind of letting him know that. And he was like, well, the fact that you were willing and able to make the decisions you had to, and, okay with that change and knowing that it was in, he's like, that alone shows that you're going to be able to be successful in anything you do. He said, because a lot of people are set in their ways and they're just not going to do it. Yeah. That's the way they've always done it. And they're going to die with that, that decision. So, all right. So we'll wrap this up with one more random question. What 3 things would you leave in a time capsule for people to see 50 years from now? And what would you want them to open?
Probably a computer. It would be one of them. This is what they used back then.
Yeah, they're gonna look at this laptop, like, what? This heavy, ridiculous thing? They carried it with them in a bag.
How archaic it looks like, rotary phone.
What do you think like a thermostat would look like to someone 50 years down the road?
Oh, they're gonna be like, man, that's ugly. Well, why would they put that? Like, why would they disgrace a wall? I think let's see what else. 50 years from now, for people to discover. I mean, certainly, maybe I would hope that it would be the KPIs and they'd be different, but based on their industry, who knows? Let's see. Maybe. Probably 50 years from now, I think everything's going to be related to technology. Probably a vehicle, how a vehicle looks today, and how what we're doing in the future. And then maybe from a sentimental perspective, let's see, what would I leave from a sentimental perspective? Maybe like article. What were you going to say?
I was saying, if you think about it, while you're thinking about that for a second, I just want. Think about like if I went and showed my kids right now like a beeper and like to get their reaction, like what is this? And I'm like, oh, and if I explain the process to them, like, well, you went to a payphone and you sent this number to this thing and this thing would beep, and then I had to go find a payphone. Like what? I mean, my kids get on an airplane. They're like, Dad, there's no TV on this plane. I'm like, you better get your damn iPad out and shut up. But I mean, so that's where I'm talking about, like the convenience factor today. Like people don't realize how different the business model is changing every year. And they think because they're living in it and they're working in it, that they don't see this change, but they have to get out and go. And I know some of my clients go to y'all shop in Vegas and stuff and take tours and get mentored and stuff. And I think that's great because you got to stay on top of what's taking and what's changing around you.
Yeah.
Would you think of a sentimental one?
Yeah, I'd say probably, some articles of clothing because, 50 years from now, they've probably already gone through 2 cycles and they might be popular again. Because I am not a fashionista. So,
yeah. Well, I tell you, Landon, it's been great getting to pick your mind a little bit. I think there's probably 12 more episodes in the future we may be able to do to unpack some more of it. But I do appreciate you coming by. Is there any last words of wisdom that you want to drop to any contractor out there that, let's say they're struggling right now and they just don't really know like where they should be focusing their attention? Is it on marketing? Is it advertising? Is it on text? Is it on the schools, building your own internal school? Like, where would you tell them to maybe just kind of get centered, get focused, start here. Maybe it's back at the basics, but what are the basic couple of things you would tell them to help them get back on track?
Yeah, honestly, I'd say it's focus internally. I would say all of that's in your head. I would say uh, I think I've had the blessing of having a unique perspective of not being from the trades and coming up through the trades, right? Having an outsider perspective, and
Right.
and I remember sitting around a table years ago. It was like, okay, we're going to build $1 billion home service company, and so let's go to work on building that. How does it look? Let's org it out. Let's see, how do we structure? What are the steps? And so I just thought that home service companies should be $1 billion service companies. Then I realized that they weren't. And, because I've worked within and seen rapid growth in companies, and I've seen companies scale from nothing to 30, 40 million in relatively short periods of time. I've seen, companies that have been around for 50 years go from 10 million to 200 million relatively overnight. Right. But that's my perspective. I expect for that to happen. I just like we plan for that to happen. That's what my overview and perspective is like. That's how it has to be to keep me interested in doing it. Right. So I think most people have a limited perspective of what their experience has been. And so start internally, get rid of that. Just trash it. And what do I focus on? What do I do first? Is it marketing? Is it training my techs? Is it going out and recruiting more people? Is it finding what do I do first? The answer is all of it. And I know it sounds overwhelming, but you have to do all of it. You can make a methodical step-by-step approach. And I've built step-by-step approach for optimizing a business like that, but you have to do it all simultaneously. You got to go out and find the people. You got to go out and find the leads. You got to go out and find the tools that are required to get those people to convert the leads. And you have to do it all at once. And you don't have to do it all yourself. That's why the people part is so important. But you have to do it all at once. Because if you wait to get the people until the leads are there, you miss the opportunity. If you get the people and you can't find the leads, now you're over capacity. You have to do it all at once, and you have to you got to consistently grow. Otherwise, you start going down.
Well, there you hear it, folks. You got to do it all at once. If it's too overwhelming, Landon can help you find someone to buy your business, or he'll buy it. So, Landon, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and I would love to have you back in the future.
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me. It's been a
all
pleasure.
right, man. Thank you so much.